violence, social climate change.
Alrighty.
There we go.
Well, Elijah, thanks for meeting with me.
Of course.
I think right now more than ever is a very important time that, people have discussions with police officers. Mm-hmm. I especially, it's 2021. We just came through a lot of opposition, a lot of tension building between, I don't know. I don't want to label oppressor, but enforcer is what a police officer is. Mm-hmm. And how long have you been a police officer for?
For 2 years, so about a year of that is training, all the way from pre-academy to going through the academy to to after the academy, doing some in-house training with your specific department, to field training where you're riding around and driving around with another seasoned officer, if you want to call it that, a field training officer. It's basically usually been on for at least 4 to 5 years at a minimum. And then after that, you're on probation. So
what does that mean?
Probation is essentially that, from the time, I think for us is from the time you graduated the academy, it was about 12 to 16 months. I should know specifically, but somewhere in that time frame where if at any point in time they feel like you are not fit to do the job, they can fire you, get rid of you very easily. Once you get tendered and on probation, they can still fire you, of course, if there's cause, but it can be a little more challenging, so to speak, because when you're in probation, I mean every single thing that you do is heavily scrutinized to make sure that you can do the job. You're basically on a leash, and not that when you're off of probation things aren't scrutinized, but it's that leash is not there anymore because there's more trust. Like, we've evaluated you, we've seen everything that you can do, we trust that you can do the job, you receive the training. So basically went through training for a year, and then been on the road for a little over a year now.
On the road as in, does that mean you're a traffic cop?
I was on patrol. So patrol, basically when you get through the academy, when you're with a police department, sheriff's department is different, but when you're with a police department, you always go to patrol. Patrol does anything from traffic. You're basically tied to your radio, where you're responding to the various calls that come out in your area that you're designated to circulate and then hang out in. So that is what you get cut loose to, yeah.
Okay. What made you want to become a cop?
Yeah, man.
That is an important question.
It's an important question, big question.
Especially in these times, you know, and I know you have a religious kind of background, please.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. So, I thought about being a cop. Let's take it back to when I was a kid. So when I was a kid, of course, played the cops and robbers, all that, running around. I always, like the idea of having a radio and riding on my bike.
You were always the cop and the cops and robbers.
Yeah, exactly, responded it. And,
just keep going. Yep.
So, so I had that. And then, as I, went to middle school, of course, all that kind of evaporated. And for a while, I was focused on playing, football. And, of course, like every kid that played football, you're like, I'm going to make it to the NFL. And those dreams evaporate for the majority of people. Then for a while I was focused on going into the military, and then eventually I became a Christian my junior year of high school. I was baptized and received the Lord Jesus as my Savior. And then from there I kind of went on the path that I was going to become a pastor. Felt called to be a pastor. Went to Liberty University down in Lynchburg. I know there's a lot of stuff that people have heard about Liberty, but I enjoyed my time there. It really shaped and molded me, I believe, to be a productive human in this world.
For sure.
So there I majored in international relations. From there, As soon as I graduated, I came back here and actually became a youth pastor for 2 years at the church that I grew up in, which was funny to see it come full circle. During that time, I was able to further my studies and graduate work. So I was doing youth pastor work and facilities assistant at the church. So I was teaching kids on Sunday, and then along with that, Monday through Friday, I was cleaning toilets. I was doing maintenance work around the church.
Really? You were a janitor?
Yeah. And so it was...
You're God's janitor.
I was. Yeah. You could call it that. So I did that, and none of it was full-time, so I had like those two jobs combined together, like amounted to less than 40 hours, which was good in the sense that it allowed me to pursue like my graduate work, because doing a full-time job and then trying to do grad school.
What was your graduate work? I thought you were in school to be. So you did go to college?
Yeah, so I went to college. My undergraduate work was in international relations. Got out of college, took a semester off while I was working, and then I went back into this seminary online and got a master's in Christian apologetics, which Christian apologetics is defense of the Christian faith. So it's really like a blending of philosophy, theology, answering questions about like God's existence or the problem of evil, looking at world religion, other world religions, how that fits with Christianity, like what is a Christian's view of other world religions and so forth. So I was doing that with the two jobs that I was doing.
Okay.
Like I said, that was great that it didn't add up to 40 hours in the sense that gave me more time to study.
Got it.
However, it didn't provide benefits. So I came to this point during that time because before I started my job, I wasn't married, I wasn't dating, I didn't even think that was on the horizon. But after I took the job, like shortly after, I met who my wife is now, and everything like went at rapid speed. We ended up we met from the time that we met to the time that we got married was a year. So I was sitting there with a less than full-time job with no benefits and still my parents' insurance, and I have a beautiful wife and we want to start a family. So I came to like this point where I was like, I felt like I was pinned up against a rock. It was a real, like, if you want to call it, just like a very difficult, like, existential period. Where I just felt like a lot of tension because I felt like, man, I'm called to be pastor. I don't know if I can give that up. I felt like it was so woven into my identity. I was like, I can't imagine not doing that. Like, especially when I've been training and laboring for it, you know, for the past couple of years, and have felt called by God to go that way. But like, I feel I need to provide for my family, and I feel like right now there's no pastor job that's going to allow me to do that.
Yeah.
So I started thinking, and one day it just kind of clicked, where it's like, well, what about law enforcement? And and at first I kind of brushed it off. I was like, man, I have to go to the academy. I have to wake up at like 4 in the morning. I was like, I can't do that. I'm such a night owl. And so I mean, honestly, those were my thoughts beforehand. But it just kept growing. I liken it to like God was really, He just kept like pushing me in that direction because I am so stubborn.
Same.
So eventually it came to a point where I knew like 100%, hey, God is calling me in this direction. So I applied with a couple departments, eventually got on with the City of Alexandria Police Department. A lot of times people don't know that's a separate, like there's the City of Alexandria, and then there's Alexandria like in Fairfax County. So I was with the city, like where Old Town and all that is. That's the City of Alexandria.
Is there a lot of crime around there? I just want to know that.
There can be.
Alexandria.
Alexandria is divided in, like how we do it, we divide it into 3 parts. There's like the West End. I don't know if you're ever familiar with the Landmark Mall.
Yeah, a little bit.
So over there, and then you got our second sector, which is where I worked, which is like where the Birchmere's at and Delray. And then you have Sector 1, which is Old Town. So throughout all those parts, each of those like sectors have their neighborhoods where there is issues, and then being connected to DC, just across the river from DC and Prince George's County, Maryland, where there's very high crime rates, a lot of that can bleed into our city.
Do you ever notice specific or like themes of what kind of crimes, like carjackings happen in this location, murders happen in this location, theft happens in that location. Is there a overlapping theme when it comes to districts and like things like that?
Yeah, I think certain neighborhoods have certain crimes. Certain areas have certain crimes. You do see those themes. I know, especially in my neighborhood that I was working, we would get a lot of domestics. That was a big call.
Is that like when a man beats up on a woman or a woman beats up on a man? What's
so
a domestic?
There's a difference between like after we've responded to the call and done the investigation, it then being labeled a domestic versus getting like dispatched to a call that they call it domestic, right? So when they dispatch you to a call, it's always gonna, if it's like a guy and a girl arguing, doesn't matter their relationship, it's gonna be labeled a domestic. But then when you get there, their relationship, that guy and girl, their relation, like when you do the investigation, it may be labeled, it may not be domestic because the relationship doesn't fit like the domestic criteria. So, like we said, we got a lot of domestic calls, got a lot of calls with juveniles doing stuff they shouldn't. But yeah, to circle back and answer your question.
There are overlapping themes.
Yeah, there are overlapping themes, and but to go back even before that, it's so easy to get up on these rabbit holes. Especially
I do that too much, so excuse me. So I appreciate you bringing it back.
You're good, bro. So kind of in this rock and hard place, not really knowing where to go, and eventually God made it very clear to me, hey, to go into law enforcement, and feeling called by the Lord, and it kind of, the way in which He did it is, a lot of times through reflection, and I feel like reflecting and being introspective and quiet, especially now where there's so much noise around it, quieted down and just listening, I did that, and during that period I was like, I feel like I am uniquely shaped in the gifts and skills that I have, being able to stay calm in stressful situations, being able to help people and build bridges with people, and to talk to people from all walks of life. I mean, you grew up in this area with me, right?
Yeah.
I remember from kindergarten, there's kids in our classes from every tribe, tongue, and nation. So that's something that we were exposed to and had like a working knowledge of that, right? So that I felt like I had some avenue which every person which I could build a bridge with.
You had a unique perspective.
100%, man. So I felt like I had these skills and like viewing life through a vocational sense. Not that there's all these like choices of jobs I could pick and I just arbitrarily pick one, but rather like sitting back and seeing like how God has shaped and molded me. I was like, hey, I feel like for at least this season of life, not saying for whatever, this fits being a police officer. And especially the idea of being able to help people in their worst moments. Like, there's no other job on the face of this earth that I can think of that has the unique access to be there to help people in their absolute worst moments. Because people call the police when, sometimes they abuse that. I will say sometimes people call us when there hasn't been a need to, but I understand. But a lot of times people call us when they have burned every bridge and where they have no other option. And so that really appealed to me. So if that answers your question, it kind of started out needing a job.
Yeah, the benefits are probably a big part of the police officer choice, though. You can't, come on.
The salary could be higher, but the benefits are great. But really, there was that motivation. I can't lie about that. Got to put food on the table. But seeing that, hey, I've also been shaped and molded, and I want to help people, and I've been shaped and molded to help people in their worst moments. Being a police officer gave me that ability to use those gifts.
So only for 2 years, is there a specific instance that you can think of that comes to... Have you encountered something yet where you feel like you've helped someone in their worst?
There's been a lot, man.
Just one in particular.
It's funny, man. There's a lot of... I feel like I got thrown into the fire pretty quick. I've had some really close calls.
Like what, man?
Have had some. We can get to that. I'll answer your question here first. But
sorry, yeah. I get excited.
Yeah, bro. One of the calls that comes to mind. I got a call about 2 in the afternoon. It was in the afternoon at some point, and got a call that this guy was at a bus stop with a knife. And he was flinging it around like he was either going to hurt himself or hurt somebody else. And so the call of course comes out as a weapon violation. Like we have a computer, and when dispatch, they send us the call on the radio, but they also send out our computer, so we can see on the call that's come out, and we can see like what the caller has said to dispatch. So the caller saying, "Hey, there's this guy at a bus stop armed with a knife. He's waving it around like he wants to hurt somebody or himself." So as soon as you see like that call, like weapon violation, because it always comes out as a call like where we can go lights and sirens to, it's so easy to get tunnel vision and like you just want to go 100 miles per hour. But thankfully I had really good trainers to just like, hey, take a breath, see what's there. And praise God that we did that, right? So, because if we didn't, it could have been real bad. So, we, of course, roll up to the call. You know, I'm thinking in my mind, this guy has a knife. I'm trying to, have as much distance as I can, right? Because I want to have as much time as possible to try to talk with this person, whatever, right?
De-escalate
it 100%. Because sometimes you get put in situations where you don't have that luxury, and that I pray I never have those days. But sometimes it happens, man. But if I can do everything I can to not get in that situation, I'm going to try. So we put some distance, and come to find out, by the time we had gotten there, a good Samaritan, it probably was not the smartest thing for her to do, but she approached the guy, realized that something was going on. More than this guy, like being upset, there's something underlining going there. She approached the guy and was able to get the knife out of his hand.
Whoa.
So, I know.
She did the cop job.
She did the cop job. And so she was, not the smartest thing, but at the same time, I can't deny she was being a good Samaritan. So, long story short, is the guy, what was going on is he was, and I had never run across this combination before, he was probably about 25 to 28, and he was both schizophrenic and autistic. And so I remember that call, just because even though like the knife was away from him at that point, like he was still very amped up and was scared and didn't know what was going on, and he just didn't want to live anymore. But he kept telling me like he was afraid to hurt himself. So
I'm guessing you deal with a lot of mentally ill
a lot like that, man. So, and this one was specifically difficult because of those underlying things going on, and but we were able to take the time and get him to open up, find someone, like locate a parent who we were able to call and help him. Help him agree to want to go to the hospital. Because in that instance, I did not feel comfortable leaving him by himself, right? Because he's saying he wants to hurt himself. Even though he's scared to, he still said the words, "I want to hurt myself."
Totally.
And in the state of Virginia, that's criteria for the police have what's called the emergency custody order, which is prescribed by Virginia law that if we believe that someone is a danger to themselves or others, that we can take them into custody so they can then get mental health treatment.
Okay, and I think that there's a lot, like, there's a lot to do with, mental health, it seems like, is one of the biggest factors kind of going on. And, like, obviously, if someone's in so much distress and they're out of control at a moment, or if there's a crime going on, there's some mental health issues going on.
Yeah.
Would you say that it'd be is it fair to say that police officers should be more heavily trained in psychiatric issues, like maybe like group psychologist with a police officer and go like fight crime that way? Do you think that there was enough mental training on the police end for you to become a valuable police officer? Besides, like your personal experience, aside, did they give you the correct and enough tools? Is what the question is.
I believe they did. I believe they did. There can always be more, and to a certain extent, there has to be a limit because police officers are asked to do so many different things, and so. Yeah, if you're focusing on so much training here, then it inevitably takes away from other areas that you need to be trained as well, right? Yeah. Because at the end of the day, yes, we're responding to mental health calls. We're having to have some skills in being able to handle mental health calls, but at the same time, we're first and foremost a police officer that are there to keep people safe and to, handle occurrences where crime is a crime, right? So that's something you have to keep in mind is like, yes, there can always be more training, but at the same time, if we do more training, that's also going to take away from other areas.
Well, what psychiatric training have you gone through in the academy?
So during academy, we have some classes on mental health, just very basic, no one kind of do's and don'ts, right? And then after the academy, you get further training and called mental health first aid. So the idea of that, right, is, hey, this class up front is not going to make you a psychologist, right? It's not going to make you a counselor because that takes years and years and years and years, right? Hours, and to be licensed, right? Hours and hours and hours of practicing and counseling, and especially when you get to mental health issues, very severe mental health issues, the training and the clinical hours that are needed go up exponentially.
Yes.
Right? So it's like, hey, this class is not that up front, but what it is, like that idea of first aid, that you can have at least enough skills and awareness to go into a situation and try to put a Band-Aid on it where, hey, I'm going to keep this situation as safe and stable as I can until I can get someone that, hey, has a better skill set than I do to then really do what needs to be done. Because a lot of times when we come across mental health calls or when they get sent to us, it's when that person who is experiencing a mental health crisis is in the absolute worst place. They're usually either looking to hurt themselves or looking to hurt others or unable to care for themselves that will lead to a bad outcome, right? And so that is why, giving us the skills, hey, to just keep that situation stable, make sure it's safe. Because there has been ideas floated around, what would it look like or would it be beneficial to have a mental health counselor right around with a police officer or have a mental health counselor to go to some of these calls, then have a police officer respond.
And what do you think about that?
That is a loaded question and can of worms. I think I'm all for looking into experimenting to a certain degree, right? Because again, like just what I just said, a lot of those calls when they come out to us with mental health are at their worst moments.
Yeah.
And those are some of the most unpredictable calls, and those are some of those calls where they can go from 0 to 100 really quick. And unfortunately, some of those calls require us to use the tool on our tool belt or our hands to keep it safe. And I always hate that. I never want to, but sometimes, because at the end of the day, it's not just about me keeping me safe and others safe, but it's trying to keep that person safe too, And I would hate to have a mental health counselor or someone thrown into that position where they're not trained to be able to do that.
100%.
Because there are instances where you can talk people down, but unfortunately there are instances where you can't. And we've had that before. So I think it's always good for those, if you can kind of screen those calls. If it seems like it's less at that end of the rope, then maybe maybe have a counselor go with a police officer. But if it's really at the end of the rope, let the police go in, try to keep it safe, and then have that counselor respond. And then to that, I would say what else you can do though, and what else we do besides the mental health first aid is CIT training. So that what that's called is crisis intervention training. So that is further training that a police officer can get, which further equips them to go into those situations and keep it stable until someone else can come in.
Do they get paid more if the police officer goes through that training?
To my knowledge, you don't.
That's ridiculous, man. No, it's really ridiculous because first of all, you get paid more money based on how hard the job is, right?
Yeah.
And you just said so yourself that the salary was kind of bullshit. It wasn't as much as you're like, I mean, I think we deserve to get paid more is what I'm hearing, and I would agree. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I think, in my personal opinion, I don't know. I think that the time it took for you to become a cop, it was very quick. If you wanted it, it was there for you. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a big issue going on right now. Like, people aren't respecting police officers enough, and possibly I believe that there need to be more qualifications to become a police officer. A real police officer should be seen as a desirable job. It should be seen as a hard job. It should be seen as hard to get into the Marines. It should be as hard to be a Marine as it is to be a cop. And I think that you fit that criteria off bat, but personally, the more training you have, the more qualified you are, the better, more money you should get. I think that to benefit everyone involved, to add to your salary, the force needs to enforce a psychiatric a 2-year-long course or training that they go to college or they go somewhere and literally learn how to be a psychologist for 2 years or something like that. Add to their salary and raise up the opinion and the job of a cop. That's what I think that the world really needs that right now, and I'm curious, and I think that's kind of why I'm curious what you think. That obviously you're biased, but the defund the police movement was a very popular notion. I don't believe in defunding the police. I do believe in reallocating money. I do believe in that. I believe in possibly defund. Something's wrong. I was sitting in class once, and this guy next to me, he just let me know he's a traffic cop. I'm like, you're a traffic cop? He's like, yeah. I'm like, you're in college right now? And apparently you don't even need a college education to become a traffic cop. And I think that that's ultimately ridiculous. I think that if we want these people to protect us, we need them to hold themselves to a higher standard. We need them to fit a certain criteria. Otherwise, how can you expect to enforce that Good Samaritan criteria when you're like so much in the middle yourself? It's like, we should be looking at heroes, not looking at and looking at not everyday people. I don't believe that. I think we should be looking at them as a raised up example. And I think that that's the important part. I think they need to add that little level of training, and then it'll add to the salary. Everyone will be more happy, but a better vetting process to become a police officer is, I think, what's needed right now.
Well, I think there's a lot there, and there's a lot of different issues and questions, like all kind of in what you just said. I think they kind of break it down, right? So you have the idea of, okay, because vetting's on one end, and then once you get vetted, okay, so we're talking about officers being better equipped, being better trained. I think, ideally, and some departments have gone this way, and usually they're bigger departments because they have the money, the resources, the manpower to do so, is that you would have let's go back to mental health, right? That you would have a certain, if you want to call it, division or unit, that's all they do, right? That's all they do is they respond to mental health calls, because again, I still wanted to be an officer, so they have the tools to respond to some of those very high-risk, dangerous situations. But at the same time, they are more equipped than, say I am, or other officers in dealing with mental health, because that's all they do. I think that's the idea that should be run with and should be supported, and money should be allocated towards that if possible. I know some departments like Memphis have done, the Memphis Police Department and the Houston Police Department. There's even a show about the Houston Police Department that the officers that were engaged in this unit. Because again, if that's their primary function, if that's their primary focus, then giving them that training, the impact of it taken away from other training isn't as much as, hey, for a patrol officer that has to do, okay, not only mental health, but I got to do traffic, I got to respond to active shooter situations, God forbid that ever happens. I got to search, I got to respond to alarm calls, do building searches, right? I need training in all these areas versus, a mental health officer responding to mental health calls where that's a specialized unit where, hey, they're not tied to the radio, so that's the only calls they're going to. These calls come out, crime occurs, and they have to respond to it because that is what they've signed up to do. Now, it is important that in those situations that police are aware of their implicit biases. They are aware of what bents they might have towards other people groups. And that in those situations, they treat everyone with procedural justice. They explain what they're doing. If they stop someone, they actually have a legit legal reason for stopping someone. So what I'm trying to say is it's a crappy situation.
Yeah.
And police job is to respond to that situation. Now they need to be mindful of how they respond to that crappy situation. But I think it is incumbent upon other forces in society to help change that situation to begin with. And that does come down to all humans, right? Because I'm more than just a police officer. My fellow police officers, we're more than just police officers. So it's incumbent upon in every area of our life, whether it be through our church or other place of worship, or it be through a community organization, we're just in our daily interactions as humans, is that we seek to change that systemic racism that's there. And so that's kind of how I view it, is right, it's there. In all area of my life, I seek to take care of it. I seek to change it one person at a time. As a police officer, a lot of times I have to respond to crime that does come from these, from whether it be all Hispanic neighborhoods or all black neighborhoods, these lower income neighborhoods. But I am mindful in when I respond to those calls, how I handle those calls. And so I think that it's a very complex, gray topic that is hard to deal with.
So I guess I'm trying to think of some solutions for the issue.
Yeah.
And one solution that I could think of, and I want to know what you think about this, is possibly like an affirmative action type of avenue where you make sure that there are certain amount of each demographic patrolling certain areas. So it's more like they have more stake in it, and they have more of a understanding of the intrinsic nature of these beings.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a very important thing, because so far it's like, someone who looks nothing like you trying to enforce a law does not have the same effect as someone who you can attribute. You're like, that looks like my cousin, that looks like my uncle, who's telling me I'm being an idiot. Like, I think that holds a lot more weight than this idea of some other coming in and telling you what to do. It seems like it'd be a good idea to add a little bit of if we're dealing with systemic racism, we understand the racial bias. Shouldn't we battle that with the same mentality and have some racial bias in the positive light? Be like, okay, fine, we're gonna have more of your race protecting you and enforcing the laws surrounding you. What do you think about that?
I think there's some truth there. I would say, because I've had both experiences as a police officer, right? I patrolled in a predominantly Hispanic area, specifically Central American, even more specifically El Salvadorian. So right there, Chirilawa is a predominantly El Salvadorian neighborhood that came to being after this El Salvadorian Civil War. There's a lot of refugees that came and settled in that area, and so they've been settling there ever since. So I have seen policing in that area where I have dealt with going on calls, and I'll be with a Hispanic officer, and the people that we're interacting with are Hispanic, and they'll listen to me more than they'll listen to him or her. So
really?
I've had that, but then I have had other instances, or they respond more to the Hispanic officer, and then I've had it when I've gone on calls when I've been on calls where we're interacting with African Americans, and I've had an African American officer where they respond more to that African American officer, but then there's other times where they respond more to me. So I think
to paint it in one stroke is wrong.
Exactly, and that's why you have to break it down and look at specifics and stay away from generalizations as hard as that can be. Now, I would say there is benefit, because at times, even if that person that you're interacting with on that call is not responsive to an officer of the same race as them, at least that officer, if they may be able to help you have the right perspective and understand where this person that you're interacting with is coming from. Now, I think it is definitely helpful on that level, but I don't necessarily think it's some type of what you want to say key that's going to unlock and make every call go smooth.
Yeah.
Because every person is different, and sometimes, honestly, there's more hostility between people of the same race, right? Because the subject might be to the police officer of the same race, like bro, like, you betrayed us.
Yeah.
There's some of that too. Like, so I've seen that too, man. So people are complex, right? So
like calling someone Uncle Tom or whatever.
Right, man. So simple solutions are not always the answer. But I do think there is some truth and there's some good insight in that. I think at the very least having officers of a particular race dealing with calls in a neighborhood of that same race is helpful for officers like me, bro. Like, I didn't grow up. I'm not Hispanic. I'm not African American, so I don't know what it's like to be Hispanic or African American living in America, where honestly they face challenges that I've never had to face or never can conceive of facing. So I think it's helpful to have that perspective, because I can only have sympathy. I can't really have empathy. So I do think it is helpful on that end.
Nice. So I guess this is just going to one of these Instagram questions. Yeah. We've kind of already covered this, but have you ever been in a situation where other cops acted dishonestly?
I've never, and this is, me truly being honest, I've never seen any officer that I work closely with being dishonest. Now, I think though there is a whole, it's not just about being honest and dishonest, right? It's about handling the call the appropriate and right way. Mm-hmm. Right, I think you have to have honesty, integrity at the foundation of everything, but an honest and person full of integrity can also handle call very poorly. So I have seen instances where there have other officers where it's like they didn't necessarily do it the wrong way, but I wouldn't have done it that way because I felt like they were amping up the situation, where if we did it a different way, we could have kept it a little lower. So hopefully that answers that question.
It does. Let's see, what else? What stereotypes do you disagree most about police officers?
Yeah, that's good. I think there's a stereotype, man, that we revel to take people in jail or to take people into custody, right? Or get people in trouble. Not at all, man.
Cops like power tripping.
It's like honestly, I can speak for me and people we are truly there to help. And a lot of times, you do have your people who commit crimes and do stuff and man, they need to go to jail. And because they just do. And you have that, and we got to do it. That's the job. Fine, we got to do it. There are times, man, where people commit crimes because they're in a bad spot, where they got a bad day, and they did something that they shouldn't have done, and there needs to be consequences for it. But at the same time, it can be painful, where it can be suck to do your job and have to take that person to jail because it's you know what? I know you're in a bad place in life. You're in a bad spot, and I wish there's more I could do to help you, and hopefully by taking you to jail and letting you kind of feel those consequences, maybe that's what you need. So I think that's one misconception that we love, man. We love the lust for the bus, man. We love locking people up. No, not at all. I think another
stereotype.
I don't know if I would phrase it as stereotype, or maybe even to broaden that question, misunderstanding. And one thing I want people to acutely be aware of for police officers, that I wasn't aware of before I became a police officer, is how much trauma as a police officer you go through. And I don't say that to like and I don't say that to put police officers on some pedestal or some group like, hey, Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter. Like, no, like, bro, police officers aren't a race. Black lives do matter, and that needs to be true. Like, that needs to be taken seriously. So sometimes people use the Blue Lives Matter as a catch-out. Like, that's not your race. That's not your primary identity, and you need to remember that. So I say that to just bring awareness and understanding of a lot of times where police officers are coming from. Because for instance, for us, man, we work 11.5-hour shifts. So from the time I would leave my door at 7 o'clock, I wouldn't get home till 8:30. And sometimes, a lot of time, every other week, that's on a weekend. So that's a whole 3 days where I barely get to see my wife. I barely get to see my son. And during those 11.5-hour shifts, man, you're on patrol. You respond to any call that comes out. So anything under the sun, man. And people are calling at their worst moments, right? Every time, right, there's a sudden death. Anytime there's a body, right, we got to go, we got to investigate. I mean, you see some of the worst stuff, man, that no one should have to see. And even if you don't think in that moment it's impacting you, because as a police officer, as a defense mechanism, sometimes you kind of go on autopilot. You just kind of get callous because everything you see, if you let every single thing you see sink into, you would go mad. You just would. So, but at the same time, your body's absorbing that trauma, right? Like, humans are complex, like, if you want to call it like ecosystems, man, like, we are complex people. And so even though maybe up here consciously, like, I've become numb, that it's not really impacting me, maybe on another level, bro, my body's like absorbing that trauma. So that's why, like, a lot of times I'll be like, I'm feeling anxious and I'm feeling agitated and I don't even know why I am. It's because I've been absorbing all this, I don't want to say nonsense, like I didn't enjoy going to this cause to help people, but like dealing with all that brokenness, jadedness of the world. So police officers...
It's negative stimulus. It's constant negative stimulus.
It's something like, so one of my field training officers, who he's no longer in law enforcement, but very close friends with, he threw a statistic at me basically that your average person, and this is standard, right? This is kind of, because there's some people in society who go through a lot more and they're never in law enforcement, right? Your standard person has maybe 1 to 2 truly traumatic experiences in their life. I'm not just talking about like a little 8th grade breakup. It's traumatic in a moment, but you know what I'm saying. Like, in the grand scenes, like truly like a
life altering,
like a death of a very close loved one. About 1 to 2. Police officer over a 25 career span, you're looking at like 200.
Jesus.
And to me, based upon what I've seen, even in just like my time on is so short, right? Like a year on the road. I think that number's a low ball because
you're being honest, man.
I'll just be honest that, and I think that plays into, and another reason why I bring this up is I think it plays into a lot of what's going on in society, right? Because there is systemic racism, and there are cops out there who are bad cops and are racist, right? And again, I can say that confidently because at the end of the day, my identity is not as a first and foremost is not as a police officer, it's as a human being. All right, so I don't want another negative human being in this job that we're so much power. You basically a lot of times hold life and death in your hands, right? I don't want someone that shouldn't be in police to be in that because that impacts everyone, right? So there are a lot of racist cops. I shouldn't say there's not a lot. There are some racist cops out there. There are some bad cops out there who should not be. And so there are situations where use of force that we see a lot of that probably are racially motivated. I can't lie. There is some of that, right? I would say I think there is another element where some of these use of force instances are related directly to the mental health of that police officer. Because they're seeing all this stuff, and all this stuff, man, like when they go home, they may be shut down, and then it creates marital problems. It creates problems with the family. It creates all these problems, right? And then over time, that gets in your head, and you go to work, and you're not in the right headspace, and then before you know it, you've made a life-altering decision because you weren't thinking clearly.
Or you were acting out of emotion. Dude, that is...
So I think that's why it's so important, and I think a lot of people aren't talking about that. Like, if we really... Because it's so easy in society to be tribal, right? To be tribal. I got my group here, I got this group over here, right? And this narrative that is being painted, right, it's always race, because that allows us to demonize police officers because that's easy, right? That's easy to deal with. We got this group is righteous, this group is not, right? It's easy when we paint it in black and white. It's a lot harder when it's a complex situation, when we're like, as human beings,
we're all a little flawed.
We're all flawed, and we're all in this mess together. Now, I'm not saying there isn't issues in race. There is, but there's also a lot of issues, man, where there's mental health. And if you want to fix the whole picture, the bigger picture, you need to take every malady into account. And so a lot of times, I would say is we also, yes, we need to be invested in breaking down systemic racism. We need to be invested in vetting more police officers. We need to be investing in teaching police officers to be aware of their implicit biases. But we also need to be invested in making sure that our first responders are taken care of in their mind and their heart and their soul. Because if they're not, it is a huge, huge, huge liability.
100%. I think that's a really, really key point in what we're talking about. And, you know, to have a very crude example, okay, let's say like Kobe beef, right? That is the top choice fucking beef, man. What is going on with that cow all day? It's being massaged, fed, it's getting drunk all day.
I've never had it. So
no, me neither, but I just heard this. Yeah. So it's literally, they put the best conditions on this cow. Yes, to slaughter it, but the whole mindset is if it has a happy life, the product will be that much better. 100%. And I think that is that can bleed into real life. Like, it's like, you know, and I think that's a wonderful point. I'm getting excited now. It's like you're bringing up like this whole idea of making sure that the cops are okay. The people that are protecting us, we need to make sure that they are okay. And I think that too much, I think a little bit of is a toxic masculinity, it's ultimately, mostly, I'm not going to say ultimately, it's mostly men on the force, kind of this alpha mentality, like, no, I'm good, I'm toughing this shit out, that trauma didn't mean shit, yeah, we're all good, we'll have a beer later. It's like, but, like you said, that trauma never leaves. It's still in you. There needs to be a fucking once a week a psychologist meeting with police officers one-on-one. Tell me how you feel, what really bothered you. That is so important. The mental health on both ends. There needs to be as good training in dealing with mental health crises, but then in the same aspect, it's like, you know, people don't recognize that after a while it would be difficult to not get jaded when all you see is fucked up shit. You know, if that's all you see, then you are going to get jaded. And I don't think that enough cops are given the opportunity to talk about their feelings.
100, no. And I think especially now, like, there's not only, like you're referring to, there's definitely the stigmatization, whether, you know, it comes through kind of backed by a wrong idea of what it means to be a man, or for you know, female, a wrong idea of what it means to be a police officer. Or to be for any man or female, what it means to be tough, or strong.
Yeah, strong is the right word.
So there's that, and then I think it's just that's stigmatization combined with now you have a platform where policemen they're just kind of told like, shut up, you're in this, honestly, like you are in this demonized category. Now no one's going to talk and that's a more dangerous place to be because now you're pushing a lot of police officers into this field where, man, they feel isolated from the rest of society. And I've always believed one of the most important chief things that you do and can do to be the best police officer possible is that you remember first and foremost that you are a human and not a police officer. Because as soon as you forget that you're a human, everyone that you come in contact with is just a subject. It's not another human being, right? Just like you, just like just like me, that needs help. So I think it is so important that we create an open forum and whether that be public, whether that be private, with a counselor. And I can speak for my department. My department is, or now my former department, now that I'm moving to a different state and have left, but
we're gonna miss you in Virginia.
Oh yeah, my former department was at the cutting edge of that. There are some amazing people at Alexandria who are really fighting for that, to destigmatize mental health amongst police and being able to talk. And then also the city is great about providing free counseling after a traumatic event
Nice.
for police officers. So yeah, man, that's spot on, bro. Spot
Yeah, I think that what was I gonna say?
It's a lot to chew.
Yeah, dude.
It's a lot to chew on.
It is fuck, I lost it again. Oh yeah, moral conflicts, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that there's an interesting, you were like, you know, first and foremost, we're people, and it's like,
Yeah.
I think if you tell a group of people like you are the problem, you're the problem, eventually they're going to internalize that and they're going to act as such. And you know, a part of me, I actually disagreed before this interview. Like, I was like, it seems almost that maybe sometimes cops are too biased. They are too human, if you will. They are too much like, I have a life outside of this. It's like, if you put on that badge and that uniform, doesn't that mean that you are putting everyone else's life before your own?
Yeah, I think with certain, especially with certain calls, 100%. I think there is a level that you are giving a huge responsibility to someone, right? As a police officer, you carry so much power, so much responsibility. Again, you literally have life and death in your hands at times. You literally have the ability to take someone's freedom away, which is, I mean, it's crazy when you begin to think about that type of power. But it's important to see that, like, that's still a human that you're giving it to. Now, that doesn't mean, like, go through all the vetting, right? Go through all the testing, right? To make sure that person is, you know, psychologically fit. To make sure they don't have, like, any demons in their closet, so to speak, that could come back and bite them or come back and blackmail them, right? But at the same time, it's important to realize that you're still, as a police officer, you still realize that you're human, right? So, like, you're not Superman. There's going to be stuff that's going to make you cry, and it's okay to cry. There's going to be times that you do make mistakes, and it's important that you own up to that mistake, and it's important that you call out your mistakes and you admit to them, and then it's important for the public to see that they are humans, right? That those mistakes are going to happen. Now, let's try to limit the severity of those by, again, vetting and proper training. But yeah, I think, yeah, I see there is this balance of, yeah, you're given so much responsibility, so much power, but putting others' lives before your own, but remembering that you're still human, and that doesn't make you Superman. So
Jesus Christ, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, so no, I understand what you're saying there.
Oh man, so I mean, with the vetting process, we're almost done.
Yeah.
I was just, you know, it seems like the issue is like a lot of these higher up cops that are harder to fire and harder to hold accountable are the ones kind of causing the dirt. I've heard that a lot. I've heard a lot of police officers, you know, quit because they're like, this is a very corrupt situation, and the people at the top who have the power want to keep that power, and they know that they're being corrupt. Like, how would internally?
Yeah.
Where's the checks and balances, and how does that work?
I can't speak to other departments. I can't speak to. I understand, like, you know, with every generalization, I'm sure there's some truth. There's some departments that are worse than others. There's some departments that are better than others. I know, with my department, there was a lot of accountability. And another thing you get into is what unions, like the unions in some states are stronger, so it's harder to fire police officers, just as it's, you know, harder to fire someone in a job with a union than without a union. Like in Virginia, the union isn't as strong, so it is easier to fire someone, a police officer without a union, than there is one, you know, with a strong union or a weak union.
So a union is good when it comes to...
It's good and bad, right? Like with everything, like there's good with it because it helps police officers get the pay they need. It also helps, you know, to represent them when they are unfairly sued, right, or unfairly treated, right? But there are also negative consequences where someone that needs to be fired, it may be harder to fire them than it should be. I can say in my department though, what I saw, again, I am young. I've only been off for a year, and I don't know as much as maybe some of our senior officers, but from what I saw, there was always that accountability. And a large part of that, it wasn't just internally that there was checks and balances, but from our community as well. Our community demanded the utmost. So if we did something wrong, like, it was going to be found out. Like, yeah, we don't have body cams.
You don't have body cams?
You don't.
Why don't you have body cams?
Because they're so, and it's something a lot of people don't know how expensive body cams are. So for us, it would cost just $1 million a year for the to store all that data.
What?
And then on top of that, right, you have all the different lawyers you have to bring on as far as reviewing that footage, releasing that footage, not editing, but like blurring out if there needs to be all that.
That's so crazy that money would ever be an issue when it comes to a police force.
Hey man, money. We're paid and funded by the city. The city is paid and funded by tax. Right? It's a whole economic system that. So we suffer when the economy suffers. Right?
That's ridiculous.
But yeah, so body cams are super expensive. But regardless, man, like even then, man, like if we did something that we shouldn't do, we knew that it would be found because our citizens are so vigilant as they should be. And the other officers, man, like we have truly like upstanding officers that like, man, if I did something I shouldn't have been, I knew I was going to get called out by another officer as it should be. So you can have those checks and balances even without having body cameras. But again, to answer your point, like, I understand there's some of that kind of going around, but I can only speak for my department that, hey, I didn't see that, but
the issues that I'm hearing is the opposite of defund the police. I think we need to invest more money into the police. I think that we need to get the psychiatric training that they need, even for personal use, to better deal with their own internalized trauma. If they have that training right at the beginning, during the academy, then that could help things along the way. It could help them in the line of fire. It could help them in all aspects. It seems like that is so integral, is that there needs to be more money, but allocated correctly inside the police department. I think that the military should be allocating some of their money and helping out the freaking police.
Yeah, man, I think that is... There's a lot of good truth there that, a lot of good and truth there that, there needs to be correct allocation, oversight of that allocation.
And training. There
could be more and more training, 100%. And, those are things I think it is, like I said, it's easy to paint broad strokes and to say, hey, defund, but then to really step back and think, okay, like, what is that going to do, and is that really going to solve the problem? And unfortunately, we live in a society where critical thinking is a lost skill and art, and titter. Sometimes it's used as titter, I guess, but Twitter is Twitter is taken as gospel and is used as a forum for public debate when it is not equipped to sustain public debate, like meaningful public debate. So. Man, I think that's encouraging for me to see that you see, as well as others see, that, hey, defund the police, like, there's going to be some severe ramifications. So let's kind of look at what might be a better avenue to pursue. So
thank you so much for talking with me.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
I appreciate that so much,
absolutely,
dude.
Brother. Absolutely.
God, it was nice running into you before you're off to... Where are you going, Texas? No,
we're going to go to the great land of Ohio. So.
Hey, Ohio is for lovers.
Yeah, Ohio's a great state. But yeah, man, I appreciate it. It's been a joy. Hopefully this can just play a little part in making things a little better and being able to facilitate real, honest discussion that actually takes us into doing good actions.
Yeah,
100%.
same.
All right, brother.
Oh my God. All right, well, thank you again.
Yeah.
Peace out, guys. Oh man, that was good.
What the fuck are these questions?